From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Beres.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Beres here with you on a Wednesday. A good show on tap for you. I'll invite you to join in the conversation. How many of you are familiar with the American Civil Liberties Union? All right, it's the ACLU. Involved in a number of issues, as you know. Sometimes can be in the middle of controversy. They can sometimes upset some people. There may be certain stereotypes with regard to, well, she's a member of the ACLU or he's a member of the ACLU. But I can tell you, among other things, the ACLU seeks to just preserve our liberties and rights as Americans in a democracy. That's what it ultimately comes down to. And we've been blessed, in my opinion, over the past 3 decades plus to have the head of the American Civil Liberties Union in Tennessee headed up by the Executive Director, Hetty Weinberg. I got to meet her for the first time years and years ago when she came on with my long-departed colleague, Larry Britton, may he rest his soul, and he introduced me to her, and there she is, Hetty. After 37 years, she finally has stepped away from the ACLU. Many of you recognize her face there because she was in many stories over the years. And the question is, who would replace her? And there is a replacement now, and I think they're lucky to have her. Many of you will recognize her from stories we've done at Metro Juvenile Court. She's there and has been there for years and has always been very accessible, and it's Kathy Sinback. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you on. So you have left Juvie Court here in Davidson County.
Yes, I have.
To replace big shoes, Hetty Weinberg at the ACLU.
Very big shoes to fill. Hetty has been an institution in Tennessee, as you said, and I'm just so honored to be at the helm following in her footsteps. That is,
and just how it came about. I'm just curious for folks. I mean, you've obviously been here in the community, very involved, especially with juvenile justice and youngsters. Santoya Brown, we know you were very much involved in her case. How did it evolve for you to go to the ACLU?
It really evolved naturally. For 25 years, I've been working as an attorney, both in the juvenile justice realm as well as a Metro attorney.
We should say that you have a legal background. You're an attorney.
I am.
You're a lawyer. Okay,
yes.
Go on. Yeah.
I was a public defender for years. I was the juvenile transfer attorney, handling all of the juvenile transfer cases, the serious cases.
Those would be the cases where the judge has to decide whether to transfer the child to adult court.
Absolutely.
That's only for the most serious.
The most serious,
cases.
Mostly homicides and serious aggravated robberies. So then I moved to Metro Legal. I was there for a few years. I represented the public safety departments, the police department, Office of Emergency Management during the flood of 2010, the fire department, and then ultimately ended up being the senior attorney for the school system for a little while before going over to juvenile court in 2014. So I have always been in government, and this is a huge change for me.
It is. And you said when you sat down, you thought you would be there at Juvie Court forever.
I did, absolutely.
And so it had to be something big to draw you to the ACLU. If you would, for our viewers, how would you, I tried to describe it in my own point of view, how do you describe the role the ACLU plays in our society? And again, it's a national organization, of course.
Yes, thank you for asking. The ACLU, a lot of people think of it as this liberal organization, but really, excuse me.
Oh, that's help yourself.
Thank
Where it's
you.
live TV, you take a sip whenever. You're right. That's kind of what I was touching on. There are folks who say, ACLU, okay, they're a liberal organization. And my take is sometimes there will be causes, and I'll touch on this after you finish, but you take both sides.
You do, we do. So it's really one of the more conservative organizations in terms of conservatism being civil liberties, civil rights, our essential freedoms, being free from government interaction and interference, and certain things that are really essential to our personhood. So it was a natural fit for me being in juvenile court. I felt like there were things that we weren't able to do. Things that had to do with systemic inequities, with both economic inequities and racial inequities, and all sorts of different issues with the criminal legal system, and even going to voter the enfranchisement that affected our children and the families that we see at juvenile court that were larger than what we could handle in the juvenile court system. I always loved the ACLU because they take both sides, because they support the freedom of speech, regardless of what the content is of that speech. They preserve all those things that give us opportunities, that give us equal opportunities to be ourselves, to live free in this world. And so when I found out that she was leaving, I saw this as an opportunity to really have a larger impact on our community and our state in some of the really essential issues. And when she retired, the Dobbs decision had just come down on eliminating reproductive freedom in Tennessee completely because of the trigger ban that we had in place. And so that had just happened. It was just a time when I saw a need for really systemic change in our state. And I talked to Judge Calloway, who I've worked with off and on for 25 years, who's my friend and mentor.
The juvenile court judge.
The juvenile court judge here. And I talked to her about it, and she's getting ready to start her second 8-year term. She wished you well, though. She understands that's your passion. She was the greatest supporter, and she still gives me a hard time about it. But
no, she's going to miss you. She's going to miss you.
And I will miss her, and I'll miss working with my friends at Metro and with everyone in the juvenile justice reform, but I'll still be doing it. Oh, you'll still be doing it, just from a different organization. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a different angle on the same problems. Yeah, well, I hope as people probably heard when I introed at ACLU, and I know there are some out there who say, well, that's the liberal side of things. You talk about government overreach, and sometimes there'll be an issue, and I remember Hetty would oftentimes get into the middle of it when prayer in schools, separation of church and state. And I'd be, there's plenty of people there needs to be prayer in schools. They don't understand the separation of church and state and public money. But on the other hand, I know Hetty Weinberg abhors the Ku Klux Klan, but she was right there fighting for their right to legally march. Absolutely. Okay, so as you say, it's something where you follow the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and you apply it, and you look for a government overreach. I guess as you sit here, picking up where Hetty left off, the ACLU's fingers are in a lot of pies. All right. Do you see certain things specific here to Middle Tennessee that's maybe different from what the ACLU is dealing with elsewhere, or is it national issues across the board? It's a very different sort of lens on issues that are going on nationally, but we have Tennessee and the South have a really different landscape on civil liberties. We have some of the most restrictive laws on abortion rights. Which we have none now. It's been completely eliminated. Even in the cases of threats to the life of the mother, it's now still a crime to terminate a pregnancy in the case of death of threat of the life of the mother. Sure. And it's just an affirmative defense. So it's really, there are no rights right now, even in those cases. And so we have to look at it from those standpoints. In the rest of the country, the ACLU, for example, is looking at how do we keep some of those rights? How do we, in the kind of purple middle, people are looking at how do you maintain some of the rights that they have. Here we're looking at how do we keep things from getting worse in terms of some of the things that have been taken away from us, and then how do we message that in a way that really resonates with Tennesseans, which is very different than what you see in New York and California. We have a Southern collective at the ACLU that's working to figure out how do we fit these goals into our values here in Tennessee. I mean, when you talk about the separation of church and state, for example, a lot of those Christian values are very important to Tennesseans, and they're also important to they're consistent with the values of the ACLU, and I don't think we always message that through as a national organization, but here in Tennessee it's really important to think about what does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself. What does it mean to give people the ability to live their lives fully and fairly? And those are very consistent with our values. And I really want to bring us back to talking about how are those freedoms consistent with some of the other things we believe in? Second chances, rehabilitation. Yeah, there's a long list here. There's stuff I want to talk. We have to take a break. When we come back, we're in the middle of midterm elections right now. Early voting's underway. And one statistic, kind of
disturbing. I mean, I knew it was low in Tennessee, but I guess according to some of these numbers here, of the 50 states in the District of Columbia, Tennessee ranked 50th, right? 50th in overall voter turnout in the 2014 election. That's embarrassing. If you're not voting, man, that's just not good. You're not being smart, and you're not practicing your, I think, right as an American. Get out and vote, but that's pathetic. So we're going to talk about that. Maybe the ACLU's view on people not voting. Hello. We'll take a break. Be back more with Kathy Sinback with the ACLU, new Executive Director, right after this. Stay with us.